we've been talking about this a lot, and the fact is that when you don't do what you're supposed to do, as a good mama and daddy, then you invite the nanny into your home. If you're falling down on the job as a good mother or father,
yeah,
and your kids,
I'm not a mother or a father.
No, I am a father.
Oh yeah,
I'm a father.
You're doing your part.
I'm trying to do my part.
Your part
is that when you don't do what you're supposed to do in the home,
right?
Then you're inviting the state to come in and to intervene. If your kids are not being fed properly, if they're not being kept clean and warm and safe and all this other business, then you're guilty of negligence. And so you say, well, do you allow these kids to suffer? Now, there's a part of me that says, as a red-blooded, Southerner, I don't want to see the state involved, even if it is to prevent, but at the same time, you're going to always have, a powerful argument for the nanny state as long as, people, are not raising their kids the way they should, perhaps.
Yeah, all right, but would the state come in even if they were raising their kids well? I think in the past they did a better job, and obviously the state started growing at some point.
Right.
And so,
Well, now it just gives them the pretext. Now, whether or not it was, despite the fact that people were, for the most part, doing, well. I mean, for example, I was, I was looking at an article the other day. It was talking about the divorce rate.
And which is supposedly going down.
I think because people are just not getting married.
Right.
They're kind of cohabitating and raising their kids and whatnot and the other.
Right.
But the fact is that the divorce rate between rich and poor 50 years ago was pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And the poor didn't divorce at any greater rate than the middle class or wealthy and so forth.
Yeah.
And now, the divorce rate amongst, the poor, the economically disadvantaged, or whatever you want to call them, they,
Is that a PC term?
The fact
PC is, watch on them right there.
The economically disadvantaged.
Yeah.
The fact is that, they didn't divorce at any, but now it's skyrocketing among these people.
Yeah.
And
why do you think that is?
I think it's just a general loss of morality. I think it's a general loss of a moral consensus.
More in the poor people than in the wealthier people?
No, I think the wealthier people, choose, not to have kids until all of their financial, ends and outs are met, and the poor don't, they don't always expect that they're going to be, wealthy enough to have kids. So they have kids. But with the wealthy, they have planned out and mapped out, I'm going to college between 18 and 25, and then I'm going to get the job.
There is that mentality.
And I'm going to map out this, upward mobility, kind of effort. And kids will come along in, at some point in that scheme.
Right.
The poor, don't, they say, look, I do the high school thing, and then I try to get a job.
Right.
And kids kind of come haphazardly. And if they marry, like I said, the statistics seem to suggest that their divorce rate is higher.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case 50 years ago. 50 years ago, there wasn't that big of a disparity between divorce rates.
Especially between blacks and whites, as far as illegitimate children.
No, you're absolutely right.
It's astronomical.
Right.
What's happened in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be there was a small difference. There was a small difference between blacks and whites.
Right.
But now the difference is just.
Well, you have 70%.
It's crazy.
Or greater than. Who knows what the real numbers are. That's why I think the Madea phenomenon. Madea. She's the it's a black man in drag. Who dresses. Yeah, he's based out of Atlanta.
I've heard about that. Yeah. And in my multiculturalism class, I heard about that.
Really?
We debated whether or not he was a stereotype or he was a good thing.
Well, see, that's so curious because people like these black intellectual types like Spike Lee love to portray him as a new Amos and Andy. He's the new stereotype of the black mammy or something like that.
Yeah,
she is.
Yeah.
But she's enormously popular.
I've never seen he or she or whatever you call them.
Really?
Yeah, never.
See, because I'm
out of touch. I'm not hip.
Well, it's a black thing.
Is it?
Yeah. I don't know too many white folks who watch Medea's Christmas reunion. Medea's goes to jail and all this other business.
I don't know.
But the fact that she is the matriarch of the family.
Right. Well, that's typical. I think
That's a principal difference between white and blacks in the South and in the U.S. as a whole. That the fact that one is largely patriarchal, one's largely matriarchal.
Yeah.
But it pisses the black intellectual elite, off that this guy is so popular with his comedy. Because it's basically, if there's anybody telling truth to power, in that community, it is that Madea type, who is saying that this is the reflection of the facts on the ground. We do come from, single-parent homes. The grandmother figure, is the central figure of the family, tying it all together, keeping it together.
Right.
But like you were saying earlier, that wasn't necessarily the case. Even as matriarchal as they were.
Yeah, it wasn't the case.
They still had children within wedlock,
right.
At greater numbers than they do today. But you've seen this erosion of the value of marriage and two-parent homes amongst your poor white. We invite in, federal intervention into our homes, into our schools, into our community.
Yeah.
Whenever, it's assumed that people are not taking care of their kids.
I gotta say, man, this is a good beer. If anyone hasn't had this is Sierra Nevada Stout. What do you think about it?
I think they owe us for promoting their beer.
I'm
going to contact these people and I'm going to say, look, we're super popular on the internet.
Yeah.
We're two jokers on the internet that have rave reviews from all the critics, and here we are pushing your beer. But I'd have to agree.
This is the first time I've ever had this. And it describes
it's the first time I've ever had it.
The description is amazing. Listen to this description, right? Is brewed with generous amounts of deep roasted malts, providing a bold roasted coffee and dark chocolate flavor.
Coffee and chocolate.
Yeah, with a hint of sweetness. This full-bodied American version of the traditional black ale is perfectly balanced.
Hey, you know what? You can sell anybody on all of those adjectives. You know that?
Good beer, man.
You can sell anything. Absolutely.
Sierra Nevada Stout. Not a southern beer from West Coast, but a very good. I appreciate a good dark beer no matter where it's from.
All right.
As far as this family, I don't know if I agree with you on this. I mean, I understand what you're saying. That you're saying that the deterioration of the family and the lack of morality invites the nanny state. But I don't know, because I think it's the nature of the state to grow. And I understand that it gives them an excuse to grow. But I think that they're going to try to grow regardless. And that they will do what they can to destroy the family in order to grow. Because that's just the nature of the state.
And I'm not saying that if we suddenly went back to some, Christian, ethic about marriage and about the sanctity of the family and about the value of a two-parent family,
right?
The mother and the father,
you
and
think
how
the state would go away?
No. I'm not saying that if you went back to that, suddenly the state would begin to atrophy and would diminish. I'm just saying that we give them the pretext.
Well, yeah, I agree.
For example, like child porn gives them the pretext to censor the internet. And schools have the ability now, the legal right, to call the police if they suspect, abuse and whatnot and the other. And it's been given them that right because I don't doubt that there are some cases that have warranted, somebody saying that kid shows the signs of being abused and whatnot.
That's true.
But that's where a common ethic, a common morality
that doesn't exist in our culture. There's nothing that unites Americans. This is one of my theses. What is that? What is that word?
We've got too many beers to know what the right word might be. So run with it. The theses
or whatever,
right?
Is that there's nothing that unites Americans. Nothing. Other than paying taxes to Washington, D.C.
In that regard, and I agree with you. I agree with you. In that regard, we're very much like the latter days of Rome.
Yes.
As long as you threw your tax into the bin, who cares if you were if you lived in Egypt, if you lived in modern day Greece, of where the Roman Empire had expanded.
You could be a pagan, a Christian, a Jew, or whatever.
You could be whatever you want, and you were considered, a good citizen of the empire. So long as, you paid your taxes. And you kept quiet. That was the other thing.
Yeah.
As long as, see, that's what the Jews found out, you know, shortly after, you know, Jesus came and went, that as long as they kept quiet,
right,
Rome was willing to, and they paid their taxes.
Yeah.
You know, Rome was willing to let them be. They agitated for independence, and here comes the state. You know, Jerusalem burned, and you know, you're absolutely right. There is no common unifying principle.
There's nothing.
It's, can you live the American dream?
It's making money.
As in making money.
It's making money.